thank you for coming this evening. My name is Ruth Stemler, and I'm on the board of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. And we are so glad that you all are here. I think somebody might come in and look at the microphone.
Is it working? I can't do it.
Can you hear me back there? Okay. All right, we're going to call it good for right now. I've got a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to turn it over to the panel. So the housekeeping is that we are working to collaborate more with AAUW, the American Association of University Women, and we are so glad that they are collaborating with us tonight on this event and that everybody showed up, and thank you, AAUW. Secondly, we have refreshments back there in the corner, and I don't want to have to carry any of those home, please. So if you have a refreshment, I appreciate it. Just, you can nibble throughout the meeting. Thirdly, we are accepting donations tonight, and a couple of us have tap to pay on our phones. So Susan Curtis and I will be at the back of the room at the end of the evening, and we will take your donation, because the work that we do, we all need money for it. AAUW does, League of Women Voters does, and these nonprofits that are up here need money to do the important immigration work that they're going to tell you about tonight. And so whatever we get tonight, we are going to split between CIRC and between Comite. And so please be generous about this work, good work that is going on in our community. And the fourth thing that I have to tell you about is Darcy is back there from AAUW. And AAUW and the League of Women Voters is supporting a ballot initiative, and she has the petitions to get this on the ballot. And we need a lot of signatures, like 200,000 across the state by July 1st. Please sign that petition. It is for a graduated income tax for Colorado. It is not a flat tax anymore. This initiative will give us a graduated income tax, and most of us, 97% of us, our taxes will go down. But if you make over $500,000 a year, you're going to pay a bit more. So we would like League of Women Voters and is strongly behind this initiative that we'd like to get on the ballot in November. All right, enough commercial messages. So the League of Women Voters is committed to nonpartisan education and advocacy that protects and strengthens our democratic processes and ensures all people can exercise their right to participate in it. Nationally, the League of Women Voters has been working on that mission for 106 years. And in Boulder County, we've been working on it for almost 94 years. What is now known as Boulder County is also the unceded ancestral land, and still is home today to many tribal nations and indigenous peoples, including the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the Sioux, and the Ute. Any of us who are not indigenous are immigrants or descendants of immigrants, whether forced or by choice. So this is important to acknowledge tonight as we engage around this important topic of immigration. We're here to hear from the experts and discuss together the topic of immigration and how we can all serve as allies to immigrants and the organizations serving immigrants. Throughout the discussion, we'll highlight ways that we can all act now to support people, policies, and service practices throughout. Please think about what you are doing or will do to support. And when we finish the panel, we'll invite you to put your notes up here on the whiteboard. So as you're hearing about this tonight from the panel, what is one action that you could take when you leave this meeting tonight? Not just hear the words, but we're inviting you to look at what action you might take. The first thing we can all do when we want to support community members through advocacy, education, and service is to be informed. And your participation in this event is very helpful this evening. So thank you for coming. Now I'm going to turn things over to Martine Eleanor. She is a board member of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County, and she's going to be our moderator tonight. Help me welcome Martine.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Martine Eleanor. I am a proud member of the League and a LWVBC board member. Another way to show allyship when acting and advocating to solve social and policy problems is to trust and lift up the wisdom and guidance of people who have expertise and direct experience. We are fortunate to have very wise and strategic community organizations and leaders in Boulder County on immigration. This evening, we have a very wise, esteemed panel of experts, and it is my pleasure to introduce them. First, I'll start to my left. Professor Violeta Chapin is an Associate Dean and Clinical Professor of Law at Colorado Law School in Boulder. Professor Chapin directs the Criminal and Immigration Defense Clinic, and she and her students represent non-citizen clients in a wide variety of legal proceedings in both state and federal court. Professor Chapin joined the Colorado Law faculty in August of 2009 after serving for 7 years as a trial attorney with the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia. Professor Chapin attended college at Columbia University and received her law degree from New York University School of Law. Next, we have Charles Vernon, who has worked since October 2025 as a staff immigration attorney at Comite de Longmont. Charles graduated cum laude from the University of Arizona Rogers College of Law in Tucson, Arizona in 2011. After graduating, he began working as a staff attorney with the Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project in Florence, Arizona, and later served there as pro bono coordinator and senior mental health attorney, handling appointments to represent immigrants with serious mental health issues through the National Qualified Representatives Program, NQRP. In Colorado, he worked with the Rocky Mountain Immigration Attorney Network, defending people being detained at the ICE facility in Aurora. Next, we have Keilly Leone. Keilly Leone is the North Region Organizer at the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, also known as CIRC, C-I-R-C. They were born in Guadalajara, Mexico, and brought here to Colorado at 8 months old. They graduated with honors in political science at Colorado State University and is currently pursuing their master's in history at the University of Northern Colorado. As a DACA recipient, they love working with their immigrant community and fighting to create a more just world. Now for the discussion. We'll start with Charles, and we'll ask for all three. Could each of you briefly share what is the mission of your organization and what services do your organization provide to the immigrant community members?
See if I can do this without clotheslining. So I work for El Comite de Longmont. It's just actually 2 blocks away here. And El Comite has been around for 45 years, approximately. Been a fixture in the local community. And a very small organization. There's, I think, about 7 of us on staff. And the way that we serve the local community, I would say, is primarily through what I would call case management services. And so the way it works is somebody El Comite exists to serve the local immigrant community. And so the way it typically works is somebody walks in the door, they don't need an appointment, and they have some sort of problem or some sort of issue, typically navigating any one of the many different systems that we have to deal with in our lives. And sometimes that can be more difficult if you don't necessarily speak English, or if you are living here as an immigrant. And so our case managers do the initial screening at El Comite. They try to figure out what the person's problem is. Maybe it's an issue, with the Department of Motor Vehicles, something like that. Maybe it's an issue with the Social Security Administration. In many cases, it's a legal issue, and so that could be anything ranging from something like wage theft, which unfortunately is a huge problem in immigrant communities. It could be any kind of civil dispute. It could be a criminal legal contact. It could certainly be an immigration issue. So there's all of these different issues with all of these different systems. The case management team tries to help people solve these in whichever way it can. And if it's a legal issue, there's a referral made to a volunteer attorney for a consultation. And actually, when I was hired in October 2025, this is the first time that El Comite has ever had an immigration attorney in-house, or any sort of attorney in-house on staff. But fortunately, throughout the years, there's been different attorneys, different types of civil attorneys, immigration attorneys, criminal defense attorneys that have come in and donated their time. And so I think we are kind of moving in a good direction, trying to have an attorney in-house on staff that can do more than just volunteer consultation and can hopefully follow up on some of the issues. But that's not the main thing we do. I think the main thing is just general case management services. We have English classes, ESL classes, a lot of different ways to fulfill the mission of serving the local immigrant community in Boulder County.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I'll just be really close to the mic, almost, too close. But hi, I'm Keilly. I work for the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. We've been around since 2002, so I'm about as old as CIRC, which is fun, which is really great. But it started out as a small group of undocumented folks and some allies who decided that they did not want law enforcement and ICE to collaborate any longer. Because if anyone remembers, in 2006, right, Colorado became one of the first states that passed what was called a Show Me Your Papers law, right, which allowed local law enforcement to collaborate and essentially racially profile immigrants, right? So worked really hard, and now that's not a thing here in Colorado, right? Law enforcement can't ask about someone's status, right, in immigration. At least that's what the law says, right? But so we've been around for a while, and we've kind of evolved, right, to now where we do a little bit of everything, but we mostly advocate on behalf of, immigrants, and most of our staff we ourselves are immigrants, or we have DACA ourselves, right? So this work is very important to us, not just professionally, but also, to our own personal lives and our own stories here. But right now, right, as the North Region organizer, I organize in Boulder, Larimer County, Weld County, all the way out to Yuma and Fort Morgan, so shout out my Eastern folks. But I do a little bit of everything, right? Right now we're doing legislative session, so we're trying to push for more pro-immigrant bills at the state level. We're consistently in touch with our national organizations, right, to see what the arising needs are, just ready to stay connected as well. So right now I'm helping out with the immigrant folks who are part of the JBS strike. That's been a kind of a rising need for our community out in Greeley. But yeah, I can talk a little bit more about our work, but it really varies depending on what our community needs and what we're seeing. Yeah.
Hi everyone, it's wonderful to be here. I so appreciate all of you that came out tonight to learn and to think and to talk about our immigrant community. It's wonderful to see so many people here. So my name is Violeta. I teach at the law school. I'm part of the clinical program at the law school. The clinical program at CU is 100 years old. We've been doing this thing for a long time. And my specific position, so we have 9 live client clinics at the law school. And some of you may know every law school in America has a clinical program. So when I was a law student, it was my favorite thing to do. I couldn't wait to get next to a client and just to start sort of doing the thing. And so in clinical programs at law schools, what we do is we get law school students out of the classroom and essentially into the courtroom, right? And to really start working with clients and to see what it means to be a lawyer in the public interest and what it means to be a client-centered lawyer. So I was a public defender for several years before I joined the faculty. I started out in criminal defense. I joined the faculty at CU in 2009 after our longstanding clinician, Pat Furman, had been there for like 27 years. He retired, and they hired me, and it was the first time that Colorado law hired a clinician that was a lawyer outside of Colorado. So they went and they did a national search, and they brought me in, they recruited me, and they've been so good to me. It has been a wonderful place to land. So all of us in the clinics, and again, we have 9 different live client clinics at CU doing a wide variety of things. We have an environmental law clinic, we have a juvenile law clinic, we have the immigration clinic, which I run, we have a separate criminal defense clinic now. But in my clinic, we represent people free of charge in legal proceedings, 100%. I'm still a public defender at heart, and so we take a couple cases every year from the Boulder Public Defender and represent non-citizen clients who are navigating a misdemeanor case. The students are doing misdemeanors, not felonies, because they're students. They don't know anything. And then the vast majority of immigrants never commit any crimes, and so we represent a wide range of immigrants navigating other kinds of purely immigration-related proceedings. And so we've spent a lot of time working with undocumented students, right, who have a variety of legal needs, whether that be DACA renewals or whether that, sometimes our DACA students grow up and get married. I love that. And then we help them adjust their status through family. So we try to help our clients access benefits that they are often eligible for. You know, unfortunately, I grew up as a public defender. I love that we have public defenders, free lawyers for people who've been accused of crimes and are facing potential loss of liberty. We did that a long time ago, that we said, we're gonna appoint a lawyer if you cannot afford one. But we do not have a public defender for immigrants in this country. So the vast majority of immigrants, and that's the reason why we justify this. I think it's a national shame and it's disgusting. But we justify it by saying that the immigration system is civil. And it's important to remember that. They say, right, it's a civil proceeding and the penalty for being here without status is to be removed. Right, just to be deported, as opposed to being in prison, right? And so we don't have a public defender for immigrants. And so the vast majority of immigrants who are trying to navigate the system are even having to do it on their own, right, by themselves, which is gross. What? Or they have to pay a lot of money for an immigration attorney, right? And organizations have struggled to hire a lawyer because lawyers are expensive. Right? And so you have to have a budget in order to be able to hire a lawyer, and it's hard to do that. But thank God, CU's got plenty of money, and so they hired us lawyers to do all of these cases, and so that's what we're able to do. We're able to provide pro bono representation to immigrants who are navigating this system. We are also a nonprofit housed within the law school, so I'm happy to be here tonight for this conversation.
Yay. Thank you. Our next question will go with Keilly. What is a common myth or misperception of people who are immigrants? And what do you think we need to better understand about what it's like to live as an immigrant in our community and the U.S.?
Hi folks, hi again. I think that's a bit of a loaded question, but I can't speak for every immigrant, right? But I can say that growing up, I encountered a lot of confusion around just even like as attorneys, right? It's complicated. I don't even understand all of immigration law, right? But just that's how complicated the system is, right? And I think people have sometimes a hard time visualizing or understanding why folks can't just get status, right? Commonly I hear like, just get in line, right? Things like that, this rhetoric that is so old at this point. But I think it's so much more complicated, right? I think also the reasons folks come here, right? I don't think a lot of the time we think about why folks are here, right? What are the reasons that allowed them or pushed them, right? No one really wants to leave their home, right? We come from beautiful, beautiful countries, and so I don't think folks realize, right, what it takes. So I urge folks, to look into a little bit of the history, right, of maybe, Latin America and some of the decisions that have been made by the U.S., right, that have pushed people to come here, right, that have created economic crises in those countries, right, because I think these aren't, they don't exist alone. Another one, right, is just the sheer fact, I think, that folks point us as more of labor, right? They see us as like, oh, they do the jobs that no one wants to do, right? Which is true, right? But I don't think that this necessarily makes it right to consistently always pinpoint labor as a reason to keep us here, or as a reason to, like, when the stuff comes up, right? When immigrants are the target, the scapegoat, right? We consistently point to, oh, well, they do the jobs that no one wants to do, right? Which is like, we have more value than that, right? We're human beings. We don't just provide taxes. We don't just provide, labor that no one wants to do. Because my mother grew up cleaning houses, right, in this country to make ends meet. But that doesn't mean that she's not someone else before she came to this country, right? So it's a really complex question, but I do just like to point to people that we're human beings, right? Outside of the fact that we provide. We're part of the economic backbone of this country. And at the end of the day, right, people say this all the time, but we're a country of immigrants, but at the same time, right, we have a history of consistently closing borders when we need to, right, and creating this myth of the melting pot, when in reality, right, it's so much more complicated and there's so many layers, right? Like, nothing in life is black and white. So I just urge folks to look a little bit into history when you have time, or talk to me. I love talking about immigration history, but yeah, well, I'll stop there.
I think it's very hard to pinpoint one kind of common myth or misconception. I know Violeta mentioned this idea that, or she alluded to, I guess, the idea that immigrants actually commit crimes at lower rates than U.S. citizens. So I think that's one major myth that we're seeing just constantly drummed into us by the current administration, which is that immigrants are coming here to commit crimes, or immigrants commit crimes at a greater rate than U.S. born citizens, and that's just simply statistically not true. I think another one that has always really bothered me is this idea that people who come to the United States and are living here in undocumented status have somehow cut the line. And that is a myth or a misconception that just betrays a lack of understanding of the experience of what it means to come here as an undocumented person and everything that comes along with that. I first got involved in immigration issues probably about a little over 20 years ago. And the thing that really got me involved was I was actually here in Boulder County. I was working as a school bus driver and driving a route for a bilingual school. And this is how I first got to learn about immigration, the experiences of immigrants. And the thing that really blew my mind was talking to people who had walked for 4 or 5 days in 100-degree heat in the desert in a place like Arizona or New Mexico, or where people had almost died crossing the river in Texas. And this is what, quote unquote, jumping the line means. It means that you literally have to risk your life to come into the country. And it's something that if you don't know a whole lot about that, it's worth reading more about, because I don't remember the exact statistics off the top of my head, but thousands of people have died crossing through the desert. And as Keilly had said, people don't want to leave their home. I don't think that that's typically the motivation for why somebody wants to come here. There could be all sorts of different reasons, but it's really just an absolute tragedy that people have to risk their lives crossing the desert to come and, again, as Keilly said, kind of form part of the economic backbone of our country. And then even to get pigeonholed in that role as, well, that's what they're here for, is forming the economic backbone of our country. So there's so many myths and misconceptions, but that's one that's always really particularly bothered me, this idea that immigrants or undocumented immigrants are cutting in line. When you look into it more and understand what that really means.
I'm going to switch the question a little bit and talk about some truths. And the truth of the matter is this country would not be what it is without immigrants, 100%. And there's many other countries across the world that would not be where they are without immigrants, right? Of course, immigrants are not reduced to their labor. None of us are, right? But the vast majority of us, regardless of immigration status, have worked, right? And we're proud of the work that we do. And it is just true that we have several sectors here in the United States that would instantly collapse if immigrants were suddenly to be like, you know what, fine. Go ahead and leave, right? I mean, if we had all of our Mexican immigrants suddenly leave and go back to beautiful Mexico, which is the only place that I want to live, if they went back to Mexico, we would have industries collapse. That is simply a fact, right? We rely on it, we need it, all the countries need it. And so how do we come up with a way that is more humane, right, that makes sense? Because I also do believe we need to have some laws, right? You need to have some rules, right, for how this works, right? And having irregular migration, which is what undocumented migration is, it's folks who come in on an irregular pathway, right? They just come. That has been a reality, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like, we could do a lot more diplomacy and conversation with other countries about the way that this could work, right? Especially with our neighbors, right? With Canada and Mexico, we used to have a system where we would have laborers from Mexico come during seasons and they would work here, pay taxes there, and then go back to Mexico. You know why? Because it's warmer in Mexico. Everybody speaks Spanish in Mexico. It's awesome in Mexico, and they want to be able to come back and go. But we have closed our borders off. We've essentially trapped everybody here, right? So we now have 14 million people living in the United States who are completely undocumented. The vast majority of them have been living here for longer than 2 decades, right? They've had children here, they've been paying taxes here. They're awesome. Have you guys met an immigrant? How many people have met an immigrant? Oh my God, they're fucking awesome. Right, like all of them, right? And so the vast majority of them are cool. And what we should do is every couple of 5 or 10 years, we should interview people, right? Because you know what's not safe, I think, for America is to have 14 million undocumented people and we don't know who they are. Well, that's like a national security issue, I think. That's a problem. We should be figuring out who folks are. And I don't mean by creating the registration requirement, which is the super scary thing that Trump just did, right, upon taking. We have a separate thing called the National Registry Act that actually exists in our immigration laws. You know, the last time it was updated was when I was 11 years old. I'm 50. I was 11 years old the last time they updated the registry. And that was essentially to say, to interview people who had come before 1972, who had been living here for a while, who were chilling, who hadn't committed any serious crimes. A misdemeanor or two, it's fine, right? Every red-blooded American has a misdemeanor. Right? Who cares about, low criminal, they have kids here, they pay taxes here, they want to stay. Okay, let's interview them, find out who they are, and give them a green card. Enough, right? And then we're also going to think about how do we do some additional diplomacy outside so that there's some method to the madness. Because I agree that you can't have the chaos. The chaos at the border is no good for anybody. It's not good for them and it's not good for us. And so how do we do something different? I think we do need to have a president who's talking to other presidents, in a kind way and not in a menacing, crazy way. We do need to have a lot more diplomacy because you know it's not, here's another truth and I'll stop here, is that migration is just getting started, y'all. Right? This is not gonna stop. Climate migration is the #1 thing that's going to move people out of the places where they are. Why? Not because they love America and America's the best place to be, because it certainly isn't, right? But it's because they literally cannot live in the places where they are. And they will move to survive, because that's what humans do. And they will move to protect their children, because that's what parents do. And so it's coming, and we've got to figure out a way to navigate this. And those of us countries that have money and power should be the front runners. We should be setting an example and working with each other so that it's not chaos, right? But right now we have a president who I think is certainly not, right? And he's not, and that he's looking at meeting things with violence, which I don't think is the best way to be as a human being, just generally. And so I think there's a lot of truths that I think we need to really sit with and make sure that we're acknowledging them, because I like facts. Yeah, you like facts, I do, girlfriend. And so, you know, if you like facts and you like truths, then we need to prepare. And that needs to be, and I'm looking for people in power who are ready to do that.
Next question. From your experience, what are the most common reasons why people migrate to Boulder County? Bless you, Violeta.
Because Boulder's awesome. No, Colorado has really become much more immigrant friendly than it was for many years, right? In 2013, and I'll just talk about these two things, we did two amazing things here in Colorado. We passed the asset bill, which allowed for undocumented high school graduates to have access to in-state tuition at colleges here. Yeah, that's really important to provide additional options to undocumented students. One time my son Joaquin, when he was in 4th grade, he got in trouble at school. And the teachers called my husband and I, we're both criminal defense lawyers. They called us in and they were like, so Joaquin says that if he doesn't go to school, he's gonna go to jail. And I was like, yeah, we definitely told him that. Are we not supposed to tell him that? I think that when you cut off people's options, like school, there's bad options. That's the other alternative, and I don't think that's cool at all. And so Colorado joined a growing number of states which allowed for undocumented students to just have more options, period, right? And that really exploded our number of undocumented students in higher level education, right? Amazing. Coming through our undergraduate institutions, we've had them come through the law school, yeah! Like going through Anschutz and medical school, and amazing, right? That's a huge plus. You know why? Because they win, but we win too, right? We've got to see that. The other thing we did in 2013 is that we made it possible for undocumented residents to get access to driver's licenses, right? That's a way for states, because we're not allowed as states to like interfere with the immigration process. That is purely federal, right? I wish I could just like give somebody a Colorado green card, that would be amazing. But we can't do that. We can't change their immigration status, but we can do things for undocumented residents that affect us as states, because we have states' rights, right? And powers, and we have the right to see like who's safe and licensed to drive and has insurance and has passed a test on our roads. And so we joined a growing number of states that have also extended driver's licenses and insurance options to undocumented people. So I think Colorado, there's a lot of reasons, I could go on for a long time about why we've passed some really good state and local legislation to protect immigrants and their families and not to target them, as Keilly said. We're not working with state and local law enforcement. We've got a lot of local law enforcement that have said we're not going to do that, right? And that's an important thing because we care about local safety and the residents that live here.
Well, I would say it's funny because I didn't come here to speak to you tonight based on my experience as a school bus driver, but this is what I'm thinking of again, because this is where I really initially, as I was saying before, learned so much about this issue, just talking to the students on the buses for the bilingual routes and their parents. And this was here in Boulder Valley School District, in Boulder County. I guess the school district, there's two different school districts here in Longmont. But so, you know, what I learned from talking to people, just anecdotally, is people move to Boulder County because it's a safe, stable place to live. I think that's a big part of the reason. There's certainly, Boulder County is a wealthy place, and there's a lot of jobs that come along with that here. So that's a magnet as well. But I think that immigrants, especially immigrants who have kids, see it as a place that they can move. There are jobs, but their kids can also get into good schools. Their kids can kind of get ahead in the world in a way that all of us want our kids to get ahead in the world. Again, I think going back to this idea that, you know, on one hand, immigrants really are propping up entire sectors of our economy, and then on the other hand, we have to be careful not to just put immigrants into that bucket and say that that's why we want them here, and that's what their function is. So that's always a tension, and I think that's exemplified here in Boulder County because I think there are perhaps more opportunities here in Boulder County, especially for immigrant families, to both find jobs and put their kids in a position where they can move up in the world.
Well, I'm not a bus driver, so I don't have fun stories like that. But I just grew up here in Longmont, actually, just over by Skyline. But I want to touch on some things. The first is that there's a large network of undocumented folks here, right? So a lot of our families, right, have settled here, and so like when we immigrated like 20 years ago, we already had family here, right? So that's kind of part of the process a little bit, right? I will shout out Comite Longmont because they were one of the first organizations that helped my parents, right, growing up here. So, I am really a product of all of the effort that has come before me, right? Of all of the immigrant activists, allies that have really created this network here in Longmont and Boulder County, right? I love that Violeta mentioned the asset bill, right, and the driver's licenses, because right as the driver's license bill passed, I was able to get my driver's license, right? Right as I was applying to college, sorry, getting emotional, but I was able to apply to college, right? And be a part of the growing number of undocumented students that were able to get, a higher education, which was, something that was never really promised to me, right? As Violeta mentioned, right? If you're not paying in-state tuition, you're paying tuition as an out-of-stater or an international student, which is very expensive, right? So I was able to actually get an education, right? With the driver's license bill, I don't know if anyone remembers, but in 2013 when it first passed, there were 5 offices that could do it, that could process undocumented people trying to get licenses, right? So my parents had to drive to Colorado Springs, right, with a gigantic packet of different things that they asked for, right, to prove that they were residents here and that, so they could take their driver's license and everything, right, when my parents had been driving on the road for many years at this point. But at this point now, right, 10 years have passed, over 10 years, oh my goodness, 2026, but it's a little bit easier, right? But that's kind of an example of, I guess, the networks that have been created and just we've been building up. It's like little Lego blocks, right? People have set the foundations and then organizations and different allies and immigrants, the children of immigrants, right, who are now grown up, we're kind of putting in the next steps, right, for that next generation. So it's easier for them to go to college, it's easier for them to get driver's licenses, and then hopefully one day, right, either get married, or I don't really want to get married right now, right, or find some way to get status, right, of some sort. But I think Colorado's kind of that beautiful example, right, at least in the last 20, 30 years of where we're going, right, and it's nice to see just our community step up, especially right now with federal attacks, right? But understand that Colorado still has, like Violeta mentioned, state powers. There are things that we can do in our communities, right? To kind of, I guess, create a little bit of a buffer, right, with what's going on federally. So, yeah.
For people, okay. For people in Boulder County who are not immigrants, but want to support the rights of immigrants, due process, protection from harm, and proceed on a pathway to citizenship, what do you suggest are the most effective ways to help? I'll put this out to anybody.
I really think we need to fund our nonprofits to get more lawyers. And I know that lawyers are not always the answer. I appreciate that. But there are so many non-citizen residents of our community who are actually eligible for immigration benefits, but they cannot access them because they don't have an access to a lawyer, right? So the city of Fort Collins did this, okay, a couple years ago. Over COVID, I met this awesome woman named Patricia Miller, who is the chair of the nonprofit Alianza Norco up in Fort Collins. And she was like, Violeta, I've got this idea. I'm going to convince the city council in Fort Collins to give me money for a lawyer. I was like, how do you think you're going to do that? And she was like, because you're going to help me do it. And we're going to explain to them why they should use taxpayer money to pay for a lawyer to be here, right? And she was amazing. Patricia organized so much. They had a bunch of qualified legal representatives, but they weren't lawyers that could come in and really do the final review and look and make sure if there were any issues that came up, because something always comes up, right? And you need to have someone who can look at it, right? But who can, a lawyer embedded in a nonprofit organization can do a ton of really great work, right? And so we were able to convince the city of Fort Collins, and they have for the last 4 years. They've partially funded, right? So they agreed to give half of the money for the lawyer, and the organization raised the rest. And they were able to hire an attorney to get people access to counsel, right? And have them access benefits, right? So if you want to reduce, there's a lot of people who want to reduce our undocumented population, right? We can figure out how we're going to do that. Are we going to lock them up at GEO, like people who've been here for years, and deport them away from their family and their jobs and their friends? I don't think we should do that when there is potentially a way for this person to get access to benefits. So I think that's like, for me, a really important way to do that. I also think it's important simply to be a witness as well. All of you are here, you're learning, you're listening, you're talking amongst each other, you're witnessing things, and you're talking about it. And that, I think, is the best way that we can sort of combat some of the misinformation, as you alluded to, right? There's a lot of rhetoric out there around how aliens is sort of like the criminal, illegal alien, which is a terrible word. I really think we should get rid of that word. And it's all throughout our Immigration and Nationality Act. There are ways to just simply change it to non-citizens, which is what they are, and not this terrible dehumanizing term. I think we can really change the rhetoric around this, right? And talk about all the things that immigrants do, because it's 100% right that they are not reduced to their labor. Of course not, right? Like, my mom is an immigrant. Right? My favorite ex-boyfriend was an immigrant. Like, there's lots of different things. My dentist is an immigrant. Like, so many, my neighbor is an immigrant. There's like all these different ways that we can characterize ourselves, most of us who are immigrants, and then all of the people that we know, and really just change that language and not, I think, give in or like propagate, I think, what's really been harmful, negative, and untruthful language around this.
No, I'm not going to talk about bus drivers. But I will say, I want to piggyback on what Violeta was saying, because, you know, I, as a lawyer, I would say I have a love-hate relationship with lawyers. But that being said, I'll just share a little bit about my 6 months so far at El Comite, because when I started, this is the first time, as I mentioned, that El Comite has ever had a lawyer in-house of any sort. Now, my experience is as an immigration lawyer, and so when I started, I sat down with our executive director, Lisa, and so, you know, we're looking at this, and we said, well, we have to build this program from scratch. And so, knowing that I'm an immigration lawyer, we said, well, what should you do? What kind of cases should you take? And we kind of shrugged our shoulders and said, well, we'll just take whatever walks in the door. So that's how we started. And as many of you probably know, there's a detention center down in Aurora. There's something close to 1,500 immigrants detained there. So when I started, I was going down to the detention center in Aurora maybe once every other week. And then it became once a week, and now I'm going there maybe 3 times a week. Wow. So unfortunately, since at the moment I'm the only legal services employee at El Comite, there's no other lawyer, there's no paralegal, we have to turn almost everybody away who is not yet caught up in the immigration enforcement dragnet, and they would just simply like to apply for legal status in some way, shape, or form. That could be getting a green card through a family member. It could be applying for to renew their DACA. It could be applying for a visa based on having been a victim of human trafficking or the victim of a crime or something along those lines. So there's all sorts of ways, and you know, again, this goes back to another myth about immigrants, which is that, they should have done something to get legal status years ago, and now they're crying about it. You know, I see that a lot in comments on newspaper articles and things like that. But so we have all these people walking in the door that we basically can't help, because I spend nearly all of my time now going down to the detention center and doing deportation defense, just because that is simply the greatest need right now, because we are in a completely unprecedented era of immigration enforcement. So, but we need, in some ways I hate to say it, but we need another attorney or 5 to do the non-defensive, what we call affirmative petitions for legal status.
At the very least, you need a paralegal.
A paralegal would be nice, because I'm not the most organized person either.
Paralegals,
So we might start with a paralegal, but there's so many people out there who, as we've been alluding to all evening, have been living here for years, working, paying taxes, staying out of trouble, and in many cases have some way that they can pursue to regularize their legal status, but they can't do it on their own. And attorneys, in many cases, just cost too much money. And at El Comite, unlike the Immigration Law Clinic, we do charge, but we have a sliding fee scale, and the highest it gets is about 10% of what a private attorney would charge. So yes, I do think supporting nonprofits, supporting the ability to hire attorneys is a way to support the immigrant community. Another thing I would just throw out there real quick is, in the current climate, support your local immigrant partnership team. Those are organizations that can really get you connected with kind of on the ground ways to support the immigrant community.
There's a lot of ways to get involved, folks, I promise. But one of them is definitely the IPTs, the Immigrant Partnership Teams. They're great. They're part of our coalition. So at CIRC, we're kind of made up not of individuals, but organizations, right? They're amazing. They just kind of started doing what they saw was needed, right? So yeah, there's one in Boulder, there's one in Longmont. So just get involved. Also, Weld County. They're across the state. So I'd urge you to look into that. I also want to shout out the Fort Collins Legal Defense Fund. That was the first campaign that I ever worked on as a baby organizer. So it was great to see them actually get funded. It was $250,000 a couple years ago, but that was the first iteration of it. So yeah, Patricia Miller really led that. Yeah. Okay.
And they out progressive to Boulder County.
They did. No, they did.
They did.
Yeah.
Fort Collins out progressive, y'all.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just saying. We still don't have one in Boulder County. This hasn't happened here.
Yeah. No.
We need one.
Yes, we do.
That would be great. Love to work on another campaign like that again. Okay, so there's a couple things that we're working on. We're trying to shut down, prevent, I guess, another detention center from happening in Hudson, right? That's been a revolving campaign, so if you want to get involved in that, I can get y'all, I can get connected. That's one of the things we're working on. One of the things that CIRC houses is I don't know if y'all know the hotline number, the 844 number. Yes, great, yeah, getting a lot of nodding heads, but we're one of the organizations that houses that, along with AFSC and the ACLU of Colorado. All three of us kind of organize that at the staff level, right? But really, it's just made up of volunteers, right? They are kind of what keeps this going. It is 24/7, right? So we have folks dispatching that are just volunteers, right? They spend their time doing this, right? For about 6 to 8 hours a shift, right? That's a long time to commit themselves, but that's how much they care about this, right? And so for a reminder, you can call 844-864-8341, and I can also write it up here for folks, but it's 24/7 statewide. So we have folks that are confirmers, right? So they've been trained. They can go on scene if you think you see ICE, right? To confirm and let our community know. Because one big thing that we've been seeing is just a lot of misinformation, a lot of, I've seen even posts on Reddit or something spreading misinformation about ICE being somewhere, right? So feel free to call that number if you think you see ICE, right? We'll have folks that are trained and are able to be there. The second option on that call is for folks who are currently facing, or a family member that's in detention, right, that can call this number, and we have folks that are trained to provide resources. But I will reiterate, we need more immigration attorneys. I cannot reiterate this enough, and I'm so happy that we have 2 here right now, but we need more. I don't want to study law, but if I would, that's something that I could, but it's a lot. All right, and then the one thing that I want to say, right, is we've had a lot of an uptick in interest in being confirmers, but we have plenty. We have about 100 confirmers here in Boulder County that are always ready and responsive at the moment. So we have a lot of folks on that right now. So I urge folks to think about themselves as callers to combat misinformation that I was talking about, right? Because we still want our families to be able to go to work, to take their kids to school, right? So I would urge y'all, there's this fun acronym that came out of the Minneapolis, all the protests and all the organizations out there called SALUTE. It's SALUTE. So this is something that you can keep in the back of your mind, right? And I'll go through it. But as someone who maybe saw like a rumor online, say like, oh, ICE was at the Walmart in Longmont, right? But these are some questions to kind of critically think before spreading this rumor and creating panic, right? So S stands for size or group, right? Think to yourself, okay, is there like an image? Is there a certain size? Like how many maybe ICE units are there? How many officers are there? Action, what are they doing? Are they arresting someone, right? Or are they just kind of surveilling? What are they doing, right? Location, be specific, right? What are the crossroad streets? Like where are they? Are they in the parking lot? Are they inside? Like, things like that. A uniform clothes, what's the logo? Does it specifically say ICE? Or does it say like ERO or another organization, right? What's the time? What's the date, right? Because sometimes we see like this misinformation, but it doesn't even have the time or the date, right? So you could be like, oh, well, they were at Walmart 2 days ago, right? Or it doesn't even have a time. Equipment, right? Are there vehicles? Are they armed? Things like this to kind of critically think. And we have a lot of graphics as well. And one of our members, actually, Rocky Mountain Equity out in Boulder, they also created a nice graphic around this as well that you can access. But yeah, so just some of these things to kind of think about before spreading this information, right? Because like I said, we don't want folks to just live in fear, right? Not be able to go to work, be able to, drive, take their kids to school, right? Or even go to school themselves. So again, I'll write the number up there, but yeah, there's plenty of ways to get involved, including help supporting our JBS strikers, our workers out in Greeley right now. Most of them are immigrants. There's, I've been there most of every day for the past 2 weeks supporting them with supplies. They need water, electrolytes. It's really hot out there, and with our bipolar weather, the weather that we have right now, it's hot in the mornings or cold in the mornings, super hot in the afternoons, right? So trying to provide waters for 3,800 workers that are striking right now. Yeah, so we have them out there. They are out there from 5:30 to 2:30 and then 2:30 to 10:30. So there's 2 shifts. So there's a lot of folks out there right now, and JBS is not willing to come to the table. So we're continuing to support them to see if they can get safer work environments, right? Because at the moment they have to pay themselves for their safety equipment. So we're hoping to get a more fair contract that allows them for a fairer wage. Okay, I'll stop. There's a lot that we do. So.
Thank you so much for all of your wisdom, sharing it with us today. Some important notes about allyship and support that the League has discussed includes donating to organizations that directly support immigrants with legal services and rapid response, using our voices to speak out to elected officials and others, volunteering for organizations like CIRC, tuning into reports from CIRC about federal agency activities in our communities and help avoiding the spread of false rumors, and volunteer and donate to groups that provide mutual aid, including groups that can deliver food, provide childcare, and other services. And now we can shift to some Q&A.
Do you have a relationship, any of you, with ACLU?
Yes. So we worked really closely with the ACLU. Yeah, so the ACLU in Denver is very active and very active in the immigrant rights space. And so I joined the faculty at CU in 2009, and just a few years later, the clinic partnered with CIRC, and Comite was part of this as well, and the ACLU to convince our local sheriffs no longer to honor immigration detainer requests from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And the ACLU wrote this, because the last thing that any sheriff's department wants to have is a visit from a lawyer from the ACLU.
Good to know.
They're like, we really don't want to talk to you. But there was some option. We thought we had a really good, so there's like lots of legal arguments, very strong ones, Fourth Amendment, mostly arguments as to why it is a Fourth Amendment violation for local sheriffs to detain someone past the time when they would otherwise be released, right? So if anybody here has ever gotten arrested, I won't ask you to raise your hand. Ooh, I was like, ooh, that's not what happened.
I was just enthusiastic about what you were saying.
Yeah, very good. No. And so, but I use this example. So if you got arrested and charged with something, once you pay bail, like I would say, my mom and I, if we had like a happy hour gone wrong, we would go, maybe get arrested, go to the Boulder jail, and they would ask us questions about where we were born, right? And if you reported a foreign place of birth, the jails used to put your name on a list and send it to ICE. And then ICE would just lodge a detainer. Like half the time they would call you and talk to you, and a lot of immigrants are super honest. They would like answer the phone and they'd be like, "Are you undocumented?" They'd be like, "Yes." Shit. I'd be like, no, don't say anything. And so, but often they wouldn't. They would just drop this detainer, which was a request, not an order, but a request from Immigration and Customs Enforcement for the local police to hold the immigrant past the time when they would otherwise be released, right? So when you get arrested, you get to post bail, usually, right? We do have a right to bail, a constitutional right to bail, and you would get out, and once you post a bail, they have to release you, right? Or once you've finished your sentence, for example, they have to release you. Or if the case gets dismissed, they have to release you. But what would happen is that the detainer would hold the immigrant in at the cost of local taxpayers, of us paying it, and then ICE would come and pick them up. But they had to pick them up within 48 hours, not excluding weekends and holidays. But it was bullshit. And the ACLU wrote this awesome letter, and what we decided to do, and we met with immigrants, and we met with immigrant organizers, and to talk about the strategy, about whether or not the ACLU should just sue them. Like, should we just go with the lawsuit? And a lot of times that's not the best way to go, right? We decided that my students and I in the clinic would go talk to Sheriff Joe Pelly. And we did the first, and the sheriff, his students, much different than the ACLU lawyers. And we went there, not a single ACLU lawyer came with us. I was the only lawyer with them, and I'm the professor. You know, and the students are like, they really care about it. They let the students go through their whole PowerPoint. And Sheriff Joe was the first in Colorado to stop honoring immigration detainers. And you know what the best thing was? Is he went and convinced all the other sheriffs. Right? They have to go talk to each other about it. Like, that's what's going to work. And that was a great strategy. And it was a wonderful partnership between immigrant rights organizations, lawyers, and the ACLU, right? Who know they just got to come in. They're real scary. They are kind of scary. But they got to come in at the right point, right? And that letter was perfect because it threatened litigation, but it did a little bit, right? It just sort of outlined it, right? But we were like, we would like to just convince you to do it so that the ACLU doesn't sue you, right? And that was a really good partnership, and it worked out well for immigrants in the state of Colorado.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I have two questions.
Oh, just one, sorry.
Okay,
because we have limited
great.
time.
No, okay, if someone wants to volunteer with one of your organizations, what about if, like, I am someone who only speaks English? Are there things for someone like me to do?
I'll repeat the question. The person asks, are there things that someone can do to volunteer for these organizations if they only speak English?
So unfortunately, I would say for El Comite right now, I've had a number of people reach out who are bilingual. And, you know, just going back to the resource issue that we were talking about earlier, I'm having trouble even getting the volunteers who are fully bilingual plugged into some kind of work to do because it just takes time away from the cases I'm already doing. So right now, at least at El Comite, you should talk to Sheba. She's actually here tonight. She's the volunteer coordinator among many other roles at El Comite, but she could potentially use you if you have a specialized skill that we have need of at any particular time. But speaking for myself with the legal services program, right now I'm still trying to figure out the best way to work in the bilingual volunteers. So I would say talk to Sheba.
Got it. Thank you.
So glad you asked. We have, yes, so I depend a lot on volunteers out here in the Boulder region, right, specifically. I consistently need folks to just flyer, right, with like the number, if that's something you're interested in, something that you can easily do. We need folks to talk to representatives about some bills that are happening, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's also a great way, right, just to sign petitions, right? Right now, the JBS one as well, I'll mention that's something. Sign that one, spread the word, right, about what's happening. Yeah, or just come talk to me afterwards, yeah, because we're running out of time, but yeah.
We did an awesome partnership with CIRC a couple weeks ago at a naturalization clinic at the Boulder Library. And naturalization clinics are so much fun. And that's people who have been lawful permanent residents for a long time who are eligible to become citizens, and it was all volunteers. And the vast majority of the lawful permanent residents speak English because they've been here for a while. And it's time for them to naturalize. And it was awesome to meet with the volunteers. That was like my favorite part to say. I love volunteers who come out and like help and like give a couple hours of their time. They're a bunch of college students, which was really sweet, right? And so I think there's a lot of ways to volunteer, especially with our long-standing immigrant community, many of whom, you know, are fully bilingual, beautifully bilingual.
Oh, goodness gracious.
We're together.
Okay, the duo.
One thing people can do is follow legislation like you suggested. Talk to your representative. There are 2 bills going through right now, at least 2, on immigration protection. You know, protecting your documents and all kinds of things. Your representatives, we're lucky. We have great progressive representatives, especially Longmont. Talk to them. Follow the legislation on the websites. It's easy. And we have an organization that does that, and we can show you how.
So just come talk to us afterwards.
Nice. And you're with the League of Women Voters.
Well, we're with the Longmont area Democrats.
So we have
an organization called CLEAN, which is Community Legislative Early Action Network, and we meet every Monday to talk about current bills.
Yeah.
And
we
we
testify.
try to spread the word out and get people to testify.
One more question. Go ahead.
I haven't heard anyone discussing block cameras, but I wonder if, I mean, it seems like that's an issue that we need to be aware of, and I wonder if anybody has opinions about that from the panel. I know there's a block camera in Lyons. I know Longmont has done some action, from what I hear, to ban that. And just as far as surveilling the population, specifically looking for people who might be undocumented, I'm hearing good information about that.
The question was about flock cameras.
Super quickly, there's a lot to flock
We have a
cameras,
city
but.
council person here.
Oh, amazing. Great. Yeah, flock cameras, there's a lot. Look into this, please, because we don't have enough time for me to really explain. Our Denver organizers really working on that in terms of Denver, because Denver decided not to work with flock, but they're working with Axum now, which is a little bit more intense. So we're working on that as well. But I would urge you to look into what flock means, right, how it tracks people, how it tracks their license plates, right, and how that puts the undocumented community at risk. And if you do not want to have that in your city, that is something that I definitely urge you to talk to your city council, right, and create your own local campaigns, and I'd love to support if that's something that's moving. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
Can I make a comment? Can I interrupt this for just a second?
Sorry, I just have one more closing remark to do.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So thank you so much for coming. Again, my name is Martine. Thank you so much for our panelists. A round of applause. Thank you to the AAUW for joint sponsorship, and El Comite, and CIRC, and the CU Law School for your partnership. We hope everyone has been inspired to take action. The next education event, the community conversation, will be at Elevation's Community Room at the Diagonal on April 28th. It's going to be about Elevate Boulder, which is the City of Boulder's Guaranteed Income Pilot Project. Look it up online, really cool stuff. Our capacity is 60 people, so please sign up early. And lastly, donations are encouraged tonight. All proceeds will be split between CIRC and El Comite, because although the league put this event on, we want to give to the people who are doing the work. And they cannot do this work without money. Money is capitalized on the script, so they cannot do this work without money. Please give generously based on your heart. We can take cash in the basket at the back of the table, or we can take tap to pay on phones. Ruth and Susan, wave Ruth, wave Susan. They will be at the back, so I don't have cash, but too bad. You have a phone, you have a card. Go see them. El Comite and CIRC. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
And then Margaret, you want to say this?
Yeah, please, before you guys leave, because everybody here wants to do something and we all have different capacity and different things that we can participate in, but I want you to know that these black door hangers have been put together by the Boulder County Democrats. It's taken the work of CIRC, ACLU, everything that everybody's mentioned here. And if you want to help somebody on the ground level, please go back and take as many of these cards that you can pass out to people that you know. You can stop at with landscapers, roofers, people who work in our community who are profilable. You don't know if they have their residential cards, if they're a citizen, it doesn't matter. Everybody knows somebody who is profilable. And the information on this card.
Tell them what it is, to know your rights.
I'm sorry, this is about knowing your rights, okay? And we went one step further than the little red cards that are around town by including the links to ACLU, etc. And so this is really good for you all to go to those websites and see how you can help in those organizations and somehow. So please, they're back here on the corner, and I have many more. I've got boxes of them that you guys can grab. 120.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.